Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today as we continue the Historic Artist Homes and Studios virtual road trip series. We have an amazing collection of presentations planned for you over the coming months with 6 participating artist home sites, including the Georgia O'Keeffe Abiquiu Home and Studio, which is the 4th stop on this year's virtual road trip. This virtual road trip is a collaboration between the James Castle House in Boise, Idaho, and the Historic Artist Homes and Studios program, also referred to as HAHS. We launched this virtual presentation series last year in response to the recently published Guide to Historic Artist Homes and Studios, written by Valerie Bulent, the director of HAHS. I have a copy right here. It's an incredible book. Her book provided an opportunity for us to vicariously explore the creative spaces of dozens of American artists during a time when many of us were stuck at home. With the desire to dig deeper into these incredible sites, this virtual road trip was born. So for those of you just learning about HAHS, this is a program of the National Trust for Historic Preservation and is a coalition of 55 sites across 25 states that were previously the homes and working studios of many American artists. So through its support and advocacy, HAHS is helping to preserve the nation's legacy of creativity in the visual arts by connecting visitors with these remarkable spaces. My name is Mackenzie Dunstan, and I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator at the James Castle House in Boise, which is located on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Shoshone, Bannock, and Northern Paiute people. And as your unofficial stop on this virtual road trip, I would really strongly encourage you to learn more about our museum here in Boise. With me today is Valerie Bulent, who is the director of HAHS, and Justina Renzoni, who's the curator of historic properties at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. Providing American Sign Language interpretation is Lavona Andrew. Along with ASL interpretation, English language captions are available by clicking on the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and then selecting Show Subtitle. So live transcript, show subtitle. We strongly encourage your questions during this presentation. Please send all questions and comments in through the Q&A box, and we will answer as many as we possibly can at the end of today's presentation. This event is being recorded and will be made available online in the coming weeks. And at the end of this presentation, we will also share links to related events, resources, and mailing list. So because this is a virtual road trip, I'd like to offer just a few brief travel notes for us to consider before I pass the mic to Valerie and Justina. Last month, we visited Passaquan, which is the fascinating art environment and home of artist Eddie Owens Martin in Buena Vista, Georgia. So the journey between Passaquan and O'Keeffe's home in Abiquiu, New Mexico, is the longest leg of this year's road trip. We'll be traveling across 8 states and over 1,400 miles. So we would recommend that if you were to do this trip in real life, you plan for at least 5 days of traveling. So from Passaquan, we're going to head west, and we'll first stop in Birmingham, Alabama. Take an afternoon to explore the Civil Rights Institute, which is a stunning cultural and research center to learn more about the city's civil rights history. After a scenic drive through northern Mississippi, spend a day or 2 in Memphis, Tennessee. Experiencing live music is a must in the city. So whether you're a fan of blues, soul, rock and roll, or any other genre, there is plenty of great sound to sample. And as with many southern cities, you don't want to miss your chance to taste Memphis's unique spin on barbecue. As we head through Arkansas, the capital city, which is Little Rock, is absolutely worth a visit. You can walk or bike the beautiful Arkansas River Trail, which actually runs right through the heart of the city, and then grab catfish tacos, which is my personal favorite, at the Flying Fish Restaurant for lunch. So after a long drive across the grasslands of Oklahoma, we'll stretch our legs for a hot second in Amarillo, Texas, by wandering around one of the many outdoor art installations in the area, some of the better known ones being Cadillac Ranch and Ozymandias on the Plains. So there's a lot to see when you finally cross after this long journey into New Mexico. So before we reach our final destination, I'd like to invite Valerie to share some of her recommendations when traveling in the area.
Thank you, Mackenzie, to you and everyone involved at the James Castle House for spearheading this virtual road trip in collaboration with Historic Artist Homes and Studios. I am so excited to have us continue this year's series with an artist who many of us feel we actually already know. For so many, O'Keeffe represents not only an artistic and modernist icon, but indeed a quintessential iconic woman. Like many women, I have my personal moments I associate with Georgia O'Keeffe and her extraordinary life, such as the birthday presentation by my mother in the early 2000s of the newly published letters between the artist and her friend Maria Chabot, who we will learn more about this evening, or in 2019, attending a preview at Tanglewood, the summer home of the Boston Symphony, of a new opera which draws from O'Keeffe's personal letters with numerous references to her passion for New Mexico. And most recently, last holiday season, an indulgence to channel a little bit of what I like to think of as that ethereal coolness that is O'Keeffe and transcends generations, the purchase through the O'Keeffe Museum of a reproduction of her signature black hat, which you see depicted on the right of your screen. But there is always more to learn, and for devotees and novices alike, there is a wonderful immersion begins at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, where one can view works from the full span of her oeuvre, providing a context for the truly unique experience of visiting her home and studio. A visit to Santa Fe, though, is also the opportunity to learn about other artists who were drawn to New Mexico and whose preserved properties await your discovery. Just 30 minutes south of the museum is the sculpture garden of Apache painter, sculptor, and teacher Alan Hauser. Enjoy the mountain vistas and inhale the scent of the juniper pines as you meander on the gravel paths in this sprawling complex. Commune with close to 70 pieces of sculpture, all set against the backdrop of several studios Hauser used at the close of his career. 5 miles east of the O'Keeffe Museum, you can visit the home and studio of artist Randall Davey. The decoratively painted wall surfaces that remain inside are highlights, including the murals Davey painted for his wife's dressing room, which you see at the bottom of your screen, and outside 135 acres of nature sanctuary beckons, as does birdsong. Some 190 species have been recorded here. This property is currently owned by the National Audubon Society. So do you want to explore another hub for artists in the state? Travel 1.5 hours northeast from Santa Fe to Taos. Stay in the former home of arts patron Mabel Dodge Lujan, with whom O'Keeffe lodged when she first started visiting New Mexico. Now a hotel, these walls once boasted salons of artists and writers such as D.H. Lawrence, Ansel Adams, and Martha Graham. Book the 3rd floor solarium room and enjoy breathtaking views of Taos Mountain, or sign up for one of the many writing and photography workshops and retreats that are now offered here. Taos also lays claim to an important artistic enclave, the Taos Society of Artists. Founding members E.I. Kaus and Henry Sharp settled into this large historical adobe compound that housed their 2 families. While here, take in the amazing gardens designed by Virginia Kaus, or peek into the pint-sized adobe playhouse designed for the children. 2 intact studios await, replete with the indigenous artifacts collected by both of these artists. And on the same campus, visit the newly opened Lunder Research Center, a 5,000 square foot repository dedicated to the legacy of the Taos Society artists. Just 2 miles away is the preserved home of another co-founder, Ernest Blumenschein, his wife Mary, and their daughter Helen, who were also artists. It offers the rare opportunity to view a large collection of Mary's paintings. This talented artist was the 2nd woman after Mary Cassatt to win a gold medal at the prestigious Paris Salon. Remember our patroness, Mary Dodge Lujan? At her invitation, the Russian-born artist Nikolai Fechin first traveled with his family to Taos at her invitation, staying at her gracious home. He ultimately relocated, and now you can visit the home Fechin transformed with his own hands. You can take in the intricately hand-carved stair rails, columns, doorways, and furniture, all featuring traditional Russian designs as you walk through rooms now hung with museum exhibitions. But now let's set off for Abiquiu via Santa Fe, stopping at some must-see locales along the way, all while taking in the sublime and singular landscape that marks this region of the country. 15 miles northwest, this cultural center is devoted to the arts and culture of the Tiwa-speaking Pueblo peoples of this region. The impressive tower is the largest adobe structure in the state. Take in a live performance or view some of the 100 pots by Tiwa artists recently and rightfully returned on long-term loan from the Smithsonian. Taking a slight detour south is the Bandelier National Monument. You could literally spend days in these more than 33,000 acres of awe-inspiring canyon and mesa country, preserving the homes and territory of ancestral Pueblo peoples. Soak in the natural beauty while standing in a kiva, a space used for rites and meetings. Marvel at Pueblo structures, some dating back all the way to 1150 AD, or just allow for serendipity, stumbling upon archaeological sites as you hike through this expansive park. A highlight, but not for the faint of heart, is visiting the Painted Cave, a 22-mile trek, but the chance for a lifetime, once-in-a-lifetime experience. Los Luceros, just 30 minutes southwest of the O'Keeffe Welcome Center in Abiquiu, is the former home of groundbreaking anthropologist and museum founder Mary Cabot Wheelwright. Georgia O'Keeffe's friend Mary Chabot managed the ranch here, and O'Keeffe stayed here while visiting her. Languish at this rare and intact 19th century hacienda, taking in the stunning altarpiece while sitting in quiet contemplation in the chapel. Outside, orchards, gardens, and live animals. Shiro sheep, goats, chickens, and even burros. Feeling a bit more adventurous, you can take a hike, including river views alongside the Rio Grande. Consider having Abiquiu as your home base while visiting O'Keeffe's home and studio. Our host, Justina, will give you a taste of the other things you can enjoy during your stay, but make sure to include this sojourn as well. 13 miles along a rusticated, AKA unpaved road, brings you to the stunning monastery set in the Chama Valley. The journey in is beautiful, marked with remarkable cliff formations, tree-covered mountains, and the winding river. Designed by noted Japanese-American architect and woodworking master, George Nakashima, O'Keeffe, shown here with Nakashima and one of the clergy, was friends with the monks here. You need a little spiritual reboot, you can visit for the day and attend religious services and explore, or stay longer for several overnights at the guest house, taking meals with the monks in that amazing dining room you see on screen, and contributing to the daily manual labor that marks monastic life. But of course, the centerpiece will be your visit to O'Keeffe's Abiquiu home and studio. What is experienced here captures the very essence of HAHS, the power of a place that served as artistic inspiration, but was also transformed by the artist. This is an amazing example of adaptive reuse by a creative who both had historical reverence and the need to place personal imprint on her home. This place, these views, have become synonymous with O'Keeffe and her art, but there is always more to learn. This artist is both touchstone and lodestone, a magnet for continuous exploration of her life, her art, her home, her evolution. In 2017, HAHS champion and advisory chair art historian Wanda Korn set off on her own journey to examine the significance of O'Keeffe's clothing, both as sewing practice and as modernist sartorial expression. This groundbreaking traveling exhibition, accompanied by an award-winning publication, reminds us that there are still uncharted aspects of this artist to exhume, and this evening's program will be equally illuminating. Thank you, Justina, for taking us on this journey with you, and to you, Mackenzie, for this collaborative event.
Thank you so much, Valerie. Well, I am so excited to finally pass this off to Justina, who is going to tell us more about this remarkable site and the artists behind it. So thank you so much. It's all yours, girl.
All right, well, Mackenzie, thank you for the introduction and the suggested road trip across the South. And Valerie, thank you for all of those wonderful recommendations for exploring northern New Mexico. So I am Justina Renzoni, the curator of historic properties here at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. The O'Keeffe Museum celebrates the art, life, and independent spirit of artist Georgia O'Keeffe. A visit to the O'Keeffe Museum offers insight not only into the artist's paintings, but also her creative process and the light and landscape that inspired her. In addition to the museum galleries in Santa Fe, the O'Keeffe Museum also maintains O'Keeffe's 2 historic homes here in Abiquiu, New Mexico. And today we will be talking about O'Keeffe's home and studio here in Abiquiu. To start though, it would be very short-sighted of us to think the history of the site we're visiting tonight starts at the moment the artist arrived. Before we begin talking about Georgia O'Keeffe and her house, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the ancestral, cultural, traditional, and unceded territory of the Ute and Pueblo peoples whose land the site sits on today. We recognize and honor their elders, past and present, and celebrate the vitality of their people today and into future generations. I offer this with humility and gratitude, an acknowledgement of the need to confront the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. So, the first question many folks have is how to actually visit O'Keeffe's home and studio. It's located in Abiquiu, which is about an hour northwest of Santa Fe and an hour southwest of Taos. This site, though, is only accessible by guided tours. We offer tours Tuesday through Saturday, March through November, but tickets do sell out weeks in advance. So we highly encourage anyone who is interested in visiting to make your reservation ahead of time. Standard tour is $55, and you can visit geocam.org or call us at 505-685-4016 for more information. In 2018, the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum opened the new visitor center in Abiquiu. The O'Keeffe Welcome Center is located next to the Abiquiu Inn off of Highway 84, and it is the starting point for your tour of O'Keeffe's home and studio. The Welcome Center is open to the public. You do not need advance reservations to visit the Welcome Center. It's open year-round, Tuesday through Saturday. And at the Welcome Center, you can see exhibitions such as the one currently on view called O'Keeffe in the Landscape. It's open until April 2023, and it explores O'Keeffe's many camping trips throughout her lifetime through her personal camping gear, photography of her friends, and her clothing. We also offer other programs here, such as garden workshops, geology hikes, watercolor classes, and film screenings. And you can visit the Santa Fe campus to see O'Keeffe's artworks in the museum galleries. Advanced reservations is suggested for that as well. Just to situate us, here is a map of the Abiquiu area. So you can see right here is the O'Keeffe Welcome Center. And if you were to visit us, you would be checking in at the Welcome Center and then going on to a shuttle that is then driven up the road to O'Keeffe's house in the village of Abiquiu. While you're here, you may also consider visiting Bodie's Mercantile, a mercantile that joined Abiquiu in 1919. And the Abiquiu Inn offers great lodging and also has a wonderful cafe. You may also want to visit the lavender farm down the road where you can pick your own lavender, as well as the Pochawinge Pueblo ruins. And also here in Abiquiu, we have Ghost Ranch. So what is Ghost Ranch? This is a common question we receive here. Ghost Ranch is a 22,000 acre retreat center and former dude ranch that's right outside Abiquiu. O'Keeffe purchased 7 acres and a house from the owner of Ghost Ranch in 1940. During O'Keeffe's lifetime, the ranch was sold to the Presbyterian Church, and they continue to operate the ranch today. O'Keeffe's home at Ghost Ranch is owned by the O'Keeffe Museum and is not currently open to the public. However, I recommend visiting Ghost Ranch to see the beautiful landscapes that attracted O'Keeffe to the area. And you can also go on horseback rides, visit their paleontology museum, and check out many other workshops and retreats that they offer. So many of you may have already heard of Georgia O'Keeffe and may even know her biography, but I'm going to give a brief overview here. So Georgia O'Keeffe is one of the most significant and intriguing artists of the 20th century, known internationally for her boldly innovative art. Her distinct flowers, dramatic cityscapes, glowing landscapes, and images of bones against the stark desert sky are iconic and original contributions to American modernism. Born on November 15th, 1887, the second of 7 children, Georgia O'Keeffe grew up on a farm near Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. By the time she graduated high school in 1905, O'Keeffe had determined to make her way as an artist. She studied at the Art Institute of Chicago and the Art Students League in New York, where she learned the techniques of traditional realist painting. The direction of her artistic practice shifted dramatically when years later, she studied the revolutionary ideas of Arthur Wesley Dow. Dow offered O'Keeffe an alternative to realism. She experimented with abstraction for 2 years while she taught art in West Texas. Through a series of abstract charcoal drawings, she developed a personal language through which she could express her feelings and ideas. O'Keeffe mailed some of these highly abstract drawings to a friend in New York City. Her friend showed them to Alfred Stieglitz, an art dealer and internationally known photographer who would eventually become O'Keeffe's husband. He became the first to exhibit her work in 1916 in New York City. By the mid-1920s, O'Keeffe was already recognized as one of America's most important and successful artists, known for her paintings of New York skyscrapers, as well as flowers. In the summer of 1929, O'Keeffe made the first of many trips to northern New Mexico. The stark landscape, distinct indigenous art, and unique regional style of adobe architecture inspired a whole new direction for O'Keeffe's artwork. While staying at her friend Mabel Dodge Lujan's house in Taos, O'Keeffe took driving lessons from her friend Rebecca Strand and Mabel's husband Tony. After a mere 2 weeks of lessons, O'Keeffe ordered herself a custom wood-paneled Model A Ford. The passenger seat could be removed and replaced with a table for her art supplies. The driver's seat could turn around to face the back, and she could use the back seat as an easel for her canvases. The mobile studio allowed O'Keeffe to drive deep into the desert landscapes and paint with protection from the elements. This also allowed her to independently explore northern New Mexico to her heart's content. So in the mid-1930s, O'Keeffe was on her way to Ghost Ranch when she stopped in the village of Abiquiu. Much to her delight, she found a vacant property, but the property was owned by the Archdiocese of Santa Fe and was not interested in selling. She wrote, "When I first saw the Abiquiu house, it was a ruin with an adobe wall around the garden, broken in a couple of places by falling trees. It took me 10 years to get it, 3 more years to fix the house so I could live in it, and after that, the wall with the door was painted many times." So what O'Keeffe's saying here is that for 10 years, she offered to purchase this property, and she was repeatedly told she could not buy it until 1945, when they finally gave in and let her purchase this home. However, in 1940, after 5 years of being told no about the Abiquiu property, O'Keeffe purchases the home at Ghost Ranch, and she tries to garden there so she can grow her own food and become more self-sufficient. Unfortunately, the garden is a huge failure, and she can't stop thinking about that house that she saw in Abiquiu. So once she gets the house in 1945, unfortunately, her husband, Alfred Stieglitz, passes away shortly after, and O'Keeffe must travel to New York to settle his affairs. She's out in New York for 3 years, distributing his art collection to museums across the country. And she doesn't want to wait for the reconstruction of the Abiquiu house, so she hires her good friend, Maria Chabot, to be the general contractor. Now, O'Keeffe had met Maria beforehand, and Maria had actually stayed at the Ghost Ranch house with O'Keeffe for a few years, helping to manage the house. As Valerie had mentioned earlier, Maria Chabot was also the manager over at Los Luceros. So she did have some experience, but she was not formally trained in architecture or construction. As the general contractor, all of the decisions on the design and construction were discussed via letters that she sent to O'Keeffe while O'Keeffe was in New York. And as Valerie mentioned earlier, these have been published in the book Maria Chabot, Georgia O'Keeffe, Correspondence, 1941 to 1949. In one of these letters, Maria Chabot talks about arriving to the Abiquiu house at the beginning of the reconstruction, and she writes, "I had never found anything as romantic as this beat up building, a ruin really. It took 6 months just to get the pigs out of the house." So this house had been vacant for decades. Members of the community had been using it to keep pigs, as well as using the garden for community gardening. So with the reconstruction of the house, Maria Chabot relied heavily on local experts, artisans, and craftspeople. Anywhere that they could salvage doorways, ceilings, hardware, other architectural features, they did in order to retain some of the Spanish style of the house. However, as you can see in these photos, the house was truly a ruin. It's 7,000 square foot adobe hacienda, with the first room being built in 1740 and many of the rooms being added on in the 1800s. For those of you who are less familiar with adobe, adobe is mud, so it's really a mixture of earth and water. And every time it rains or snows, which it does do here in the high desert, the adobe slowly degrades. And so it does require ongoing maintenance. And so that wasn't happening during that vacant period. As a result, during the reconstruction, they had to create 22,000 adobe bricks. And they were able to rebuild the house to the square footage that you see today. And so in 1948, O'Keeffe is still in New York City, and she discovers that Abiquiu will be getting electricity. So she decides that she wants to have running water brought into the home, as well as the other homes in the village. And with these final touches, the house is ready to be lived in by 1949. So in 1949, she permanently moves to New Mexico. And she stays here in Abiquiu until 1984, when she walks off the property to move to Santa Fe to be closer to doctors and medical care the last 2 years of her life. So at that point, she would have been 96. So today, if you are to visit the O'Keeffe home and studio, you will see it as she left it when she walked off the property in 1984. So the main reason that O'Keeffe wanted this house was actually the garden. The garden continues to be productive today, as you can see in this photo. Every year, we grow between 200 to 300 pounds of food. Often, most is donated to a local community food bank that then distributes it throughout the community. We also offer an internship program for high school students where they're paid to come work in Georgia O'Keeffe's garden during the summer. They get to learn about traditional agriculture, they get to learn about healthy eating, cooking, composting, canning, and it's just a lot of fun. It's a continuation of O'Keeffe's legacy. She herself loved to garden, and she also was a proponent of youth education. So part of what makes this garden so special is that we use acequia irrigation. And so acequia irrigation relies on canals to connect to a water source, and then the vegetable gardens and other areas of the property are flooded. So every Monday morning at 7 a.m., our gardener, who was also the grandson of Miss O'Keeffe's gardener, goes up to the mountains, turns a valve to release water from an underground aquifer, and then gravity brings it down to O'Keeffe's house. The canals are filled with water, and that water is then spilled over into the vegetable garden. As you can see here, it looks a bit like a rice paddy or a cranberry bog. So this house has water from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Monday mornings, and this weekly watering has been happening since the 1800s. And so when we're done watering at 10 a.m., we close the gate at the top of the canal on the other side of the garden wall. And then the next property up that is also on the same canal has the opportunity to water. And when their time is done, they close the gate, and then the next property up waters. So it's a communal irrigation system, and O'Keefe was thrilled to not only have water rights, but have this very sustainable way of irrigating the property. The second reason O'Keefe really wanted this Abiquiu house was actually this door. This door, however, was not the only area of interest. It was actually the wall around the door as well. So this house was originally adobe. In the 1950s, O'Keefe decided that after a decade of ongoing maintenance and upkeep, it would be easier to have cement stucco applied to the exterior walls. And so what you're looking at here is actually cement stucco with the black patio door. Here in this painting, you're seeing O'Keefe paint the door and the wall before the stucco was applied. And once the cement stucco was applied, O'Keefe was actually much less interested in creating artworks about this wall. So before the stucco is applied, O'Keefe makes over 20 artworks of the patio door in this adobe wall. And here in this image, you can actually see some texture here. And that texture is actually showing the real texture of adobe. So adobe is traditionally women's work in northern New Mexico. And when the mud is applied to the walls, it leaves the hand gesture that the worker had used to apply the mud to the wall. And so Miss O'Keefe really loved that texture. And she used to say, "My house was made by the hands of women." The patio wasn't only there for artistic inspiration, it was also one of Miss O'Keefe's favorite places to spend time with her chow chows. So Miss O'Keefe loved dogs, and somebody gifted her a chow chow, and once she had one chow chow, that was the only dog breed she had for the rest of her life. So she had 6 chow chows. She would have 2 at a time, and you can see 2 of them here sunning themselves in the patio while Miss O'Keefe is grooming them. Now, in the 1950s and 1960s, Georgia O'Keeffe started traveling internationally. She brought back objects and incorporated them into the physical structure of the building, such as this Buddha hand pictured here, which can be found in her bedroom next to the fireplace, embedded into an adobe wall. And we believe she brought that back from a trip to East Asia, and we've identified it as being from 15th century Thailand. Here we also have an image of a Mayan clay figurine that she had brought back from Mexico. This she had embedded in an adobe wall of one of her hallways. But she didn't just bring back objects. She also brought back ideas and inspiration from abroad. So after a 1959 trip to Japan, O'Keeffe returned to Abiquiu and asked her gardener if they could prune the sagebrush in the patio to look like a bonsai tree. So if you're to visit the O'Keeffe home and studio today, you will not only see this large bonsai in the patio, but you'll also see many more bonsais throughout the property, all of sage bushes and juniper bushes. So if you're to visit, this is how you would see the sitting room today. This is the sitting room as it was set up in 1984. It's very calm, very peaceful. You see a lot of neutral colors, and this gorgeous window frames that tamarisk tree, really bringing the outside in. And you see a lot of natural materials in here, the mud walls and floors, the wood ceilings, tree stumps for plant stands, rocks along the windowsill, all very characteristic of Georgia O'Keeffe. However, this is the exact same room in 1965. This room shows a lot more color, a lot more texture, many more patterns, And in 1965, O'Keeffe's lifestyle was quite a bit different. In 65, she would have been doing more entertaining, and these bright colors and patterns were very much part of the style in the mid-century. Once you get to 1984, Miss O'Keeffe's really using the sitting room as her sanctuary to go sit with her chows at the end of the day and listen to classical music while looking out at her beloved tamarisk tree. Part of the reason I really like to show separate photos from different time periods is to remind people that when you're visiting our historic house, you're only seeing a snapshot in time. O'Keeffe lived in this house from 49 to 84, and it went through many, many different iterations. Not only would she change the decor, but she would actually change the physicality of the house in many different ways. One example, these are actually built out of the adobe floor. They're adobe mounds that she put some textiles on top of so that she could have seating around this coffee table. When she got tired of that, all you had to do was pour water on top of it and the mounds would disintegrate. She also made other changes like enlarging windows, adding fireplaces, and she did change a lot of the house during the reconstruction to create a better interior flow. All this being said, I like to say that the Abiquiu Home and Studio is one of Georgia O'Keeffe's largest and most dynamic works of art. Every detail of this home was very deliberately thought out, and this was O'Keeffe's way of self-expression by creating an environment, creating a space that was something, she had dreamed up. And so that type of freedom and that type of self-expression to me seems very artistic. So this is what O'Keeffe's studio would have looked like when she was actively painting. But when you visit us today, you'll be seeing the studio as she had it in 1984. Unfortunately, she started suffering from macular degeneration, and discouraged by her failing eyesight, O'Keeffe painted her last unassisted oil painting in 1972. But O'Keeffe's will to create did not diminish with her eyesight. In 1977, at age 90, she observed, "I can see what I want to paint. The thing that makes you want to create is still there." But late in life and almost blind, she decided to enlist the help of several assistants to enable her to again create art. In these works, she returned to favorite visual motifs from her memory and vivid imagination. She also hired staff to stay over in a guest bed set up in her studio so that she was not alone at night. So when you come visit us today, you will be seeing the way that Miss O'Keeffe left the studio in 1984. This was the very end of her career, and she was not making as much artwork. So you're going to see a place that is not reflective of the studio at the height of her career. So now we're going to join this presentation for a short virtual tour of the home and studio. So O'Keeffe's home and studio is a National Historic Landmark. During her lifetime, she was aware that there could be tours of her home someday if it was turned into a historic house museum. And that was something she was okay with as long as the house did not undergo major changes. Here's some more footage of that beautiful garden. And you can see a little bit more of how it looks when we're doing our flood irrigation. And in the background, you can see some gorgeous hollyhocks. We have lots of flowers around the property. When O'Keeffe was first planning the garden, she wanted to plant all of the flowers she had painted in New York, but that was just not possible here in the desert. Then you would venture into the patio, get a chance to see that beautiful patio door and this gorgeous entrance with a big elk skull that Miss O'Keeffe purchased from a hunter at the Okewingé Pueblo. You'd have the chance to walk around her pantry. Here you can see that the pantry is quite large. There's every kitchen gadget imaginable, as well as teapots that she had purchased abroad, coffee makers, other ceramics. And my favorite part of going in here with visitors is often people recognize items from their own home or their home as a child or their grandmother's home. And here we have some great examples of herbs that had been dried and placed in jars. Miss O'Keeffe ate out of the garden year round. So here in the kitchen, it's very, very simple, very clean lines. She was a fan of technology, modern conveniences that made life easier so she could get back to focusing on painting were always appreciated. So you have top of the line stoves, you have a mangle there, which is an iron used for tablecloths and sheets. And then through here, you would peek into the dining room. So Miss O'Keeffe did do a lot of entertaining in her early days in New Mexico. Folks loved to come visit her out here as a retreat. And then of course into that gorgeous sitting room that we've already talked a little bit about. You can definitely feel how relaxing and serene this room would be for Georgia when she was just looking to rest at the end of the day. Over in a separate building is where you would find O'Keeffe's former studio and her bedroom.
Give us one moment. Oh, there we go. Hey, Justina, welcome back. Hi.
Sorry about that. If I hadn't mentioned, we're in rural New Mexico, and so sometimes we have little blips in the internet. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump back in. And I'm gonna fast forward just the littlest bit. I'm not sure where we left off with the video. Okay, we'll just jump to the kitchen. So from the kitchen, you would peek into Miss O'Keeffe's dining room. And here is the sitting room. So it's very much an open floor plan. She removed walls and doorways to increase the interior flow, since typically Spanish style architecture in northern New Mexico, it's called plazuela style, and it primarily leads to a courtyard each room. So she decided to make it a little bit easier there. And then here in a separate building is where Miss O'Keeffe had her studio as well as her bedroom. And as you can see, it's a spectacular view, which is part of the reason that they decided to turn the old carriage house into the studio. Originally, Miss O'Keeffe wanted her bedroom to be in the main part of the house, but Maria Chabot convinced her to put it in the carriage house so that every morning when she woke up, she would wake up to this incredible view. You can tell a little bit that there are skylights in this room. Miss O'Keeffe primarily painted using natural light, and she has an office area in the back. She was quite a savvy businesswoman and took meticulous records on her own artwork sales, as well as the distribution of Stieglitz's art collection to different museums throughout the country. It's quite a beautiful space, and this gorgeous carpet looks quite a bit like the adobe flooring, but there's actually an adobe floor underneath where linseed oil was added to make the floor very durable and resistant. But as she began to lose her vision, she added this beige carpet, so there was a bit more contrast between the floor and her chow chows. In this space, you'll also have the opportunity to see some original O'Keeffe sculptures. We have a few on the property, as well as a couple sculptures by her former studio assistant, Juan Hamilton. Here's a peek into her closet, and then straight into the bedroom. Those two pots next to the bed were made by Miss O'Keeffe. She started taking pottery classes later in life after her vision had started to go. And from here is when you really get to take in this incredible view. So Miss O'Keeffe decided to have these very large windows that are on the corner of the room so that you get this gorgeous 180 view. Her house is up on a cliff overlooking the Rio Chama Valley. From there, you can see Sierra Negra. And you can also see many other places just from O'Keeffe's parking area, including the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, which are in the very back there, and Abiquiu Mesa. So when it came to designing the house, she wrote, "Two walls of my room in the Abiquiu house are glass, and from one window I see the road toward Espanola, Santa Fe, and the world. The road fascinates me with its ups and downs, and finally its wide sweep as it speeds towards the wall of my hilltop to go past me." Here is that view that she's referring to. So down below is Highway 84, and it's wrapping right around Abiquiu Mesa. And luckily, Miss O'Keeffe did not have to leave her house for inspiration. She was surrounded by these gorgeous views. Here is one of the paintings she did of Highway 84. The highway was put in and paved after she'd already been living in the Abiquiu house, and instead of just being frustrated with this construction project, she decided to make it one of her subjects. And here, just to wrap things up, is one of my favorite photos. You can see George O'Keeffe over here sitting at the head of the dining table. This is Italian photographer Tony Vaccaro, who was a good friend of Georgia O'Keeffe's and often went to visit her. And these young gentlemen over here are young boys that lived in the Abiquiu village who were invited over for dinner. And Tony Vaccaro actually made spaghetti with a tomato sauce for everyone. And what I love about this is you really just see a different side of Georgia O'Keeffe. She's often represented as a very stoic figure, and she's known more as an icon as opposed to her as a real person. But the real person loved a good laugh, and she really enjoyed connecting with her community. So it wasn't unusual to have some youth over the house for her. When I talk to folks in the village, it's so exciting because many of them were alive when she was still here, and they really remember her. And so that's when you get fun stories, like the story for this photo right here. I actually did not know the story until we had a gentleman come in, and he opened up the book that includes this photo. And when he showed me the photo, he pointed himself out and said, "That's me right there." This dinner was one of the most exciting nights. And so here we really try to focus on who O'Keeffe was as a person. And hearing these types of stories really gives you a much broader understanding of who she was and a much more well-rounded impression. So I've heard other stories from people, such as the fact that on Halloween, everyone wanted to go to Miss O'Keeffe's house because she gave out the best treats. I've even heard folks tell me that they used to go over to her house after school. She'd have easels set up in the garden, and the kids could paint if they wanted to, or if they just wanted to look around the garden, be outside, play around. She was more than happy for them to do that. So Miss O'Keeffe was really an active member of the Abiquiu community, and she made a lot of connections here. And I think it's important to realize that, you know, as someone who was alive not that long ago, there's still a lot of history here and a lot of stories that we have yet to uncover. So I'm really learning something new about Georgia O'Keeffe all of the time, which is just an incredible experience to have. So thank you so much for joining me for today's virtual road trip. If you are interested in visiting, I do want to say one more time that we really encourage you to call several weeks in advance to make your reservation. And the site is only accessible by guided tour. So you won't be able to just drive up here and jump out of the car and go see Miss O'Keeffe's house. It's up in the village of Abiquiu. And so we really ask you to just come by the Welcome Center to learn more. And if you are looking to read more about Georgia O'Keeffe's homes, I can't recommend this book enough. Georgia O'Keeffe and Her Houses, Ghost Ranch, and Abiquiu, written by our former curator, Barbara Bueller-Lyons, and our projects director, Pita Lopez, who was Miss O'Keeffe's secretary for 13 years. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Justina. Oh my gosh, I am so glad to have gotten to participate and see this presentation around Georgia O'Keeffe's beautiful home, but also to learn more about her daily life and how this home even came to be, and her lasting legacy in Abiquiu. So we're gonna move into the Q&A, and I see there's a couple already started, but I do have a curiosity myself. I love the live stream of the Abiquiu garden. I think it's so cool, and I'm curious, what was the inspiration for that? How long has that been going on?
That's been going on for quite some time now, and it was kind of connected to the development of the garden internship program. And so I don't remember if I said this, but if you're interested in seeing acequia irrigation in action, go to gokm.org on Monday morning at 7 a.m. Mountain Time. And we have a live stream, so you can actually watch our gardener bring the water in. It's actually a very interactive process because he controls where the water moves throughout the property. It's very unique, and it's something that's really a hallmark of northern New Mexico culture. This was a irrigation style that was brought over by the Spanish, and the Spanish had learned it from the Moors.
Nice. So a couple questions in here. So someone is reading a book called Lovingly Georgia and is wondering about if Anita Pulitzer ever visited Georgia O'Keeffe in New Mexico. Do you happen to know?
I do believe she visited, but I don't have the specific year off the top of my head, unfortunately. But Anita Pulitzer was the friend that I had mentioned earlier in the lecture who shared O'Keeffe's charcoal drawings with Alfred Stieglitz. And she did not ask Georgia O'Keeffe before she did it. So that did create, I think, just a little bit of tension between the two of them. But ultimately, that was the catalyst for O'Keeffe's career.
Wonderful. So there is some curiosity about why there was some initial resistance in selling this home to her. Is there any more information about why it wasn't until 1945-ish that the house was sold?
Yes, so the house was originally built by one of the original settler Spanish families. And in the 1800s, they donated the hacienda to the Catholic Church. So the Archdiocese of Santa Fe owned the property. And originally, the property was donated with the intention of maybe building some kind of Catholic school or something along those lines. Now, many decades had gone by and nothing had happened with the property. So by the time Miss O'Keeffe had seen it in 1935, it had already been vacant for quite some time.
Gotcha.
But I believe the church was still thinking there was a chance they could have some sort of project up there, whether it was building a school or something else. And so they were really hesitant to sell it to her, in addition to the fact that the Abiquiu village is a land grant community. And what that means is that the Spanish king granted land to some of the original Spanish settler families here. And when New Mexico was annexed by the United States, they agreed to respect those land grant agreements. And so anyone who lives in the village of Abiquiu proper is a descendant of one of those original Spanish families.
Wow.
Technically, O'Keeffe's property is in the land grant. So she was one of the first non-Spanish people that was allowed to buy property and live up there. And I don't think there's been many other exceptions.
Wonderful. Okay. Someone wants to know, is the tree still there? And I think maybe they're referencing that large tree that's in the window.
Yes. Yeah, so that tree is still there. And we get a lot of questions about it because it is a tamarisk tree, which has been identified as an invasive species here. But as a historic site, we leave all of the tamarisk trees exactly as they are. And originally they were brought over from Spain to help with soil erosion. And we think that our trees are so old that they don't have some of the same invasive qualities as the newer tamarisk trees. They don't require quite as much water.
Wonderful. Have some folks that are curious about her closet. If you can share a little bit more about her clothes, shoes, some of those personal belongings we saw throughout the tour.
Yes, so as the curator of historic properties, I will say the textiles is probably my favorite part of the collection. And that's both the textiles we have that are furnishings and the textiles she wore. So Miss O'Keeffe had a very iconic style and is often seen in a black wrap dress with some white peeking out, a white scarf in her hair, and a black gaucho hat. And while she did dress that way, she also did wear a lot of color. So most of the portraits that you see of Georgia O'Keeffe, she was working with a photographer, it was staged, and she was really trying to present an image that conveyed some gravitas. But O'Keeffe in the day-to-day, she wore jeans, she wore denim button-down shirts. She had some great hiking boots that she used to walk around in, but she also used to walk around the desert in her PF Flyers. So many bandanas that she would have in her pocket or around her neck. And we have some really gorgeous skirts with large pockets, and those pockets were used to pick up and carry, or to carry the rocks that she would pick up. And so a lot of the skirts have little holes in the pockets because you can tell like a rock must have poked right through there. And those skirts she wore out in the desert, she wore camping. And so it's incredible that we have her day-to-day clothes, but we also have some of her more styled clothes like the wrap dresses. And we have a lot of the original inspiration materials that she used, like the kimonos she brought back from Japan, that went on to kind of influence the wrap dress look.
That's incredible. I love seeing how much she was inspired not only by the direct landscape, but all the kind of environments that she had an opportunity to interact with, bringing back the best parts to her work and closet even. So there's so many questions that are still left unanswered, but just to be respectful of everyone's time, we do need to wrap up. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Once again, this event is brought to you by the James Castle House, the Historic Artist Homes and Studios program, along with the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. And I want to thank you so much, Justina and Valerie and Lavona, for your time and energy and commitment to this program. I dropped all the links for related events, resources, and mailing lists into the chat. So please make sure to click on any that are catching your attention. Included in that chat are links to this incredible book. So if you want to plan your own road trip, this is a must-have for your bookshelf. And I believe the book we showed earlier, Justina, do you still have it nearby? Yes, that one and the other. Yes, I believe those are all linked as well. So if you want to keep exploring these sites and this site specifically, would highly recommend those. I really hope that everyone can join us next month as we explore our next site, which is the desert art environment of sculptor Noah Purifoy, which is in Joshua Tree, California. And just as a reminder, all these presentations are recorded and are uploaded onto the James Castle House's YouTube channel. So if you are looking for past presentations from this year or the year before, please check it out there. And I believe that is also linked in the chat. So thank you everyone so much. And without further ado, I think we'll say good evening. All right, thanks y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.